going to my camera again. All right, so lesson 22 is finding the A value from given information. So our learning goals are that we can calculate the A value from given information from a graph or from words, okay? So calculate the A value from the information given in the graph and then state the equation of the parabola in vertex form. So we're given the vertex, so I would first figure out the coordinates. So it's 1, 5. And we're given this point here too. It doesn't look as nice, but we're given the point 0, 2. So for most of us, we would say, okay, the step number is negative because we're going down 1, 2, 3, which is right, okay? And if you got one as easy as this, if it didn't say to calculate it, it would be fine to just state it. So our prediction is that A is going to be -3. But we're starting off with an easy one so we can see the steps that you would take for a harder one. So because we're given the vertex in this case, we want to start off with our vertex form, our general formula. And I would substitute in the things that I know right now, which are the H and the K. But I also know that this point lies on this parabola, which means it's going to satisfy the equation of the parabola. So that means when x is 0, because this is an x, y should turn out to be 2. So if I do that, if I replace y with 2 and x with 0, then the only unknown becomes A, and I can calculate it. So first of all, on this side, I'm going to do the brackets, -1 and square it, giving me +1. And +1 times A is 1A, or just A. So again, 0 minus 1 is -1, -1 squared. Show you on my calculator here the steps I would take in my mind here. So 0 minus 1 is -1. -1 squared is +1. +1 times A is A. And then I want to get A by itself. So I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. So I get A is -3, which was what our prediction was. Okay. And then now I want to write it in vertex form. So that's going to be that form, just substituting in H and K. So now I know A is -3. I already knew my H and K were 1 and 5. Don't forget the squared. And that would be your answer. I would say for this unit, it's good to have a piece of paper that has the 3 general forms written down, especially the vertex and the intercept. So our next question, calculate the value of A from the information given in the graph and then state the equation of the parabola in vertex form. Okay, so the vertex is right on the corner, so we can figure it out. So let's do that first. So 4, -4. And we also know this point here is at 1, 2, 3, -1. So I might think, okay, I'm going to try a half here, over 1 up a half, over 1 up 1.5? No, it's not. Okay, so it's something different. This is my H and K. So I know two things towards the vertex form. And in vertex form, there's only 3 numbers to sub in, A, H, and K. So I know 2 out of the 3. So that's the form I'm going to use.
Miss Northwood?
Yeah?
I think the vertex is 5 to -4.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Ben, I agree.
You guys are awesome. Okay. X minus H squared plus K. So we don't know A. We now know the correct H is 5. So that's what we can write down so far for a vertex form. But we also know this point is on the parabola. So we know that when X is 3, Y is -1. So we can replace Y with -1 and X with 3. So 3 minus 5 is -2. -2 squared. Remember, when you square a negative number, you get a positive. And A times 4 is just 4A. And you could have gone straight from here to here if you're okay doing that. So now we've got like a grade 9 two-step equation. We want to get A by itself. So we're going to undo the subtract first by adding 4 to both sides. -1 plus 4 is 3. Divide both sides by 4. And you get A is 3/4. You can see if that makes sense. So over 1 up 3/4. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. So always do a little test. It's positive, which is important because it's opening upwards, and then try your over 1 and see if it makes sense. Okay. Then once you're sure you got the right A, then we need to just put it in vertex form, which means making sure we've got A, H, and K all put into the general formula. There we go. So there's 2 questions where we had to, well, one we didn't really have to calculate it, but we did. And then the second one we did have to calculate it. All right, so our next question. No graph this time. So when there is no graph given, then you're gonna have to calculate it. Determine an equation for the parabola that has a vertex. So they're giving me the vertex again, which is the H and the K. That passes through the point 2, 6. So they give me the vertex, so I'm going to start off with vertex form. And so far I can substitute in H and K. So X minus -3 is going to be X plus 3. And don't forget the squared. So A is what we don't know in order to get have our whole vertex form. So we take our point. And this point's on the parabola, so it means when X is 2, your Y value is going to be 6 on this parabola. So we can use that information. Just make sure you put X and Y in the right spots. And then you deal with this 2 plus 3 squared next. So 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 squared is 25. And A times 25 is 25A. So those are the steps you have to take to get it into like a two-step equation. A is what you're trying to find. So you're going to add 4 to both sides. Then on this side, we'll have 10. Divide both sides by 25. And then kind of look over your fraction and see if you can reduce it. So in this case, 5 goes into the top and the bottom. So I can reduce 10 25ths to 2 fifths. 0.4 is fine as well, okay? I will definitely accept 0.4. I don't think it's gonna happen in grade 10, but in grade 11, if you get 1/3, 1/3 is not exactly 0.3, so you would have to leave it as a fraction. But I think the fractions you're gonna get in grade 10 will all work out to perfect decimals. So as long as you keep the decimal perfect, like if you got 0.375, leave it as 0.375, you'll be fine. So determine the equation. So we still have to figure out the equation. So we just substitute A, H, and K into the general form. And that would be your answer. So far we've totally dealt with just vertex form. Our next example, we're going to need to use intercept form to calculate the A. So this example says calculate the value of A from the given information in the graph and then state the equation of the parabola in intercept form. So remember, intercept form has this general formula that you learned yesterday, where A is the step number and R1 and R2 are the x-intercepts. So just looking on the graph, I could say R1 was -3 and R2 was +3. And then I also know this point here, which is at -2, +2. So this point here is at -2, +2. So because I know these two x-intercepts, I can substitute them into the intercept form of the equation. So x minus -3 is the same as x plus 3. Remember, there's a minus in the formula. And then x minus R2 is 3. So this is just subbing the two intercepts in that you know. And then we still need to know A in order to write the parabola in intercept form. So this is where our point comes in. So for this point to be on the parabola, when x is -2, y has to be +2. So we can replace y with +2 and each of these x's with -2. Like that. Similar to kind of our K calculation yesterday, except we know the Y value. It's the A that we don't know. So we can figure out each bracket separately. So -2 plus 3 is 1. And -2 minus 3 is -5. And then 1 times -5 is -5. Times A is -5A. So again, this is three things multiplying together, all being multiplied. So the order you multiply them in doesn't matter, but they all have to get multiplied together. And then divide both sides by -5 to get a by itself. Even though the negative's in the denominator, when I rewrite this fraction, I'm going to bump it up to the numerator since it doesn't matter whether it's with the denominator, the numerator, or even with the fraction bar. So I'm thinking a is -2/5. So here's my vertex. Negative makes sense. 2/5 on a decimal is exactly 0.4. So does it look like when I go over 1, I go down 0.4? Yeah, it does. Okay, so it makes sense. So I always check to see if it makes sense on the graph. And then we're going to put our equation in. So now we do know A, we know R1, and we know R2. And it was intercept form that they asked for. So now I just fill in A, which is -2/5, or -0.4 is fine as well. X plus 3, X minus 3. Okay, so that's an example of where you use intercept form to calculate the A. And why did we do that? It's because we were given the intercepts this time and we weren't given the vertex or the exact coordinates of the vertex. So it's always going to be between vertex form and intercept form, and it depends on the info that you're given in the question. Okay. Next one, we're not given a graph. So the x-intercepts of a parabola are at -2 and 4. So that means I'm given one x-intercept is at -2 and one x-intercept is at 4. If the parabola passes through the point -4, 8, so we also know the point -4, 8 is on the parabola, determine the equation of the parabola in intercept form. So first of all, I need to know the general formula for intercept form and write it down. Substitute in my x-intercepts, remembering that there's a minus in the formula. To get the signs wrong in the middle here is to get the question wrong, so be really careful. So I'm thinking x minus -2 is going to become x plus 2 and x minus 4. And then we know if that point's on the parabola, when x is -4, y is 8. So I can use that fact to calculate the a value. You place each x with -4. Then calculate each bracket. -4 minus 4 is -8. Then remember, these are 3 things multiplying together. So I can do the -2 times -8 on my calculator. And then that positive 16 gets multiplied by a, which gives me positive 16a. And a is what I want to get by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 16. So a is 8/16, which reduces to either 1/2 or 0.5, whatever you like better. Either one's fine. And then we need to write the parabola in intercept form. So it's going to be y equals, so our a is 1/2. And then x minus r1 is x plus 2 because r1 was negative. And x minus r2 is our x minus 4. So that was another intercept form example. Our last example, a parabola has only one x-intercept at the point 3, 0. If the parabola passes through the point 8, negative 40, determine its equation in vertex form, intercept form, and standard form. So, I'm going to do a little sketch here. If a parabola only has one x-intercept and it's at 3, 0, what does that mean this point represents other than the x-intercept? Anyone unmute yourself and tell me if you know?
It's the vertex.
It's the vertex, okay? So if you only have one x-intercept, so imagine all the different ways you can cross. There's two x-intercepts. There's two x-intercepts. There's no x-intercepts. There's no x-intercepts. But the only way to get one x-intercept is if your vertex is right on the x-axis. That's the only way to get one x-intercept. So this point 3, 0 is not only an x-intercept, it's also the vertex. Okay, so that's an important thing to know. If it only has one x-intercept, that x-intercept is the vertex. And it passes through the point 8, negative 40, which is like way down here somewhere. So we should be expecting to get a negative a. That's another thing, but because we know this is h and k now, we can use vertex form. We could have also used intercept form to calculate the a. We just would have had to realize that since there was only one x-intercept, R1 and R2 were both positive 3, and then we could have used the intercept form way to get a as well, okay? It wouldn't matter as long as you keep your work correct, like you do all your calculations correctly, you'll get the same value for a whether you used intercept form reasoning to get it or vertex form reasoning to get it, okay? I'm going to use vertex form. I guess when I was in high school, that's what I preferred, but it really doesn't matter. Some people might prefer the calculations like this procedure for getting a. And if you have a choice, then just do which one you like better. So k is 0, so I don't really need to have a plus 0 there. And I know that this point 8 and negative 40 is on my parabola. So I know that when y is negative 40, x is 8. Eight minus 3 is 5. So that's going to be 25a because 5 squared is 25. Divide both sides by 25. And then we're going to need to reduce here. So you can see if it's a perfect decimal if you like, which I'm sure it will be. Or we can divide top and bottom by 5 because you can see that they both end in either 5 or 0. So negative makes sense, and 8 over 5 is our a value. So now I have to determine the equation in all three forms. So I can already do vertex form right here. So it's going to be y equals a, which we just figured out was negative 8 over 5, x minus 3 squared. Intercept form. Again, intercept form has a general formula that you can just sub right into. So intercept form, my A is still going to be the same, -8/5. And R1 and R2 are both +3. So that's what my intercept form would look like. Standard form, that's where I have to do some work. I'm going to have to use FOIL to expand these and then multiply. So I'm just going to leave myself some room to do that. So intercept form is this form here. Vertex form is this form here. I like using the highlighting or boxing because for standard form, what you write first isn't standard form because it involves you either expanding out the intercept form or the vertex form. So I'm going to expand out the intercept form. So you always do the multiplying the binomials first, and then you leave distributing that constant until the end. So x times x is x squared. X times -3 is -3x. Then my inside, -3 times x is -3x again. And -3 times -3 is +9. These combine to give you the -6x. And then here's where you've got to multiply through using the distributive property. And you have to remember each of these things has to get multiplied by -8/5. And that's where some of you may feel way more comfortable with writing -8/5 as -1.6, and that's fine, okay? I'm going to show the fractions just because. So you would think of this x squared as x squared over 1, and when you multiply by a fraction, you multiply the tops together. So -8x squared, and you multiply the bottoms together. And same thing here, you can think of -6x as -6x over 1, and multiply the tops together. So a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's going to give me +48x over 5 times 1 is 5. And then you can think of 9 as 9 over 1. Multiply the tops together. So -8 times 9 is -72 over 5 times 1, which is 5. And that could be my standard form. Again, I'm just going to write up here. You could have had your A being -1.6. And then when you expanded the x minus 3 times x minus 3, you'd get x squared minus 6x plus 9. And now when you distribute, you're going to be multiplying through by a decimal, which you may find easier. And they mean the same thing. So to get the next one, I would do -1.6 times -6 is +9.6x. And then -1.6 times +9 is -14.4. So either one of those is fine for me, okay? Just comfort level. If you're good with fractions, use them because you're kind of practicing for grade 11. And then also, if you're either box it or do like a therefore statement, I like the color coding. This is my standard form here, okay? All these steps in between are just my calculations towards getting standard form. All right, so that is our lesson for this morning on finding the A value. So I'm gonna click out of this and then stop the recording. Hopefully it doesn't kick me out again. We'll see. Stop recording.